This is Talk is Sheep, a podcast by the Wild Sheep Society of British Columbia. Come along as we take conversations that matter to you into the high alpine.
Episode 101, Rachel Ahtila. What a great BS session with her. I love talking to Rachel because she's you just ask her something and then just listen. And she's so knowledgeable. She's so well-spoken and she's so easy to, like, she can converse, that girl. She's good at what she does.
Yeah, we tried to get this going a couple of weeks ago, but due to where she lives now, way out in the bush, the internet just up and died on her. So she drove, God, I know roughly where she lives. So she probably would have drove at least an hour each way on these icy, snowy roads to get some signal for us, and hung out with us for just over an hour. That easily could have turned into a 3-hour conversation, but we'll have her back.
Well, we had to cut it off, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that we still need to talk about, and we just couldn't because obviously we're not Rogan. You're not going to listen to Steve and I drone on for 3 hours. Probably would have listened to Rachel for 3 hours, but anyway, we're going to have her back on the show. We just kind of caught up with where she is, what she's doing these days, and but she's got some really cool projects on the go, and we talk about grizzly bears, we talk about handguns and bands, and we're going to revisit that with Rachel again here in the new year. We're going to have her back on the show and talk about all these important things that she's working on behind the scenes that we should all be concerned about and be thinking about.
Yeah, it's it falls right in line with Act Now, right? It does. They chip away, and we're seeing it constantly behind the scenes. And hell, there was an article, was it a couple of weeks ago now, by the time this comes out, where they're trying to come after the firearms the Conservation Officer Service uses because they're too deadly during the wolf call and stuff like that. It's just do some Googling, have a look and see what the next fight is, and just engage. We're going to be firing up the Government Engagement Committee shortly to kind of kick again the issues that are pressing. And we need your support for that. So
yeah, you mentioned this, the CO service. So that was on CBC yesterday. It's in the news cycle, but CBC printed that article yesterday, and there was had 20 new COs posing for this picture, and one of them had they have a new rifle. It's a 308, but it's an AR platform, and they're calling them assault rifles, and that there's all this,
they're too deadly.
They're law enforcement. It's a law enforcement rifle.
Yeah, they say they're too deadly for part of the issues. They're too deadly for the wolf call. I didn't know. I figured you'd want something that's quick, easy, accurate, humane, and to take care of that job as quick as possible. But it's an ugly battle we've been fighting for years, and it's sadly only going to get worse. And we need people to engage. We say it all the time. We hear it all the time from elected officials, right? If resident hunters and concerned people got engaged and they heard from them regularly, we'd own the vote. But yeah. Anyway, here we go off on a rant.
Yeah. So we just had the BC Wild Sheep Summit in Prince George this past week, November 16th to 18th. And that was basically, we got people from all regions across British Columbia, government, First Nations, guide outfitters, individuals represented by conservation organizations, Wild Sheep BC, BCWF, backcountry hunters and anglers. We all got together and we talked about wild sheep. We looked at the issues facing the wild sheep resource and looked at ways to help each region individually. So great opportunity to get all the stakeholders at the table, have a discussion, and come up with an action plan to support wild sheep and make sure that we have healthy, growing, robust populations in British Columbia. So great to see so many people enthusiastic and caring about wild sheep. And roughly 100 people showed up to try and make a difference. And just a great summit, great opportunity to talk about the wild sheep resource, and hopefully we can just continue to support the wild sheep in these regions and see healthy and viable populations in the future.
Exactly, and that's what it's all about, right? A bunch of like-minded individuals coming together and brainstorming right? And sharing ideas and bringing in new viewpoints and old viewpoints and coming together as one for the betterment of the resource and populations around the province. It was a good time.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that, let's go to episode 101. And you're going to love this listen. Always enjoyable to chat with Rachel Ahtila.
Across Canada and throughout the world, if you come across a campfire in the woods, on a mountaintop, or next to a river, you'll find warm company and friendly people gathered around. Regardless of your lifestyle or place you call home, we invite you to learn more about what it means to be a hunter in the modern era. If you love the outdoors, care about where your food comes from, and are concerned for the future of wildlife and the environments that they need to survive, pull up a seat. We have a story to tell. Welcome to our campfire.
Rachel Ahtila, welcome to the show. Take 2.
Hey, good things take time.
So here we are. We tried to do this last week, and we had some technical issues, and the Wi-Fi crashed. But anyway, finally connected. So thanks. And you got a great signal. You're looking good. You got your red scarf on. You got your woolly sweater. It's minus 40 in the north right now.
We wouldn't be Canadian if we weren't, a little bit bundled up and battling ice this time. Hey, it couldn't be easy.
Yeah.
If it was easy, everyone would do it.
Absolutely. So speaking of Canadian, you were Australian for a while, right? You went down south and you were an aspiring actress in Australia. Is that correct? Is that?
I was in New Zealand. Okay. I was. I packed up my life back in 2009. And I was down there for a year and a half, and I got to act in a few gigs, actually. Apparently had a callback from my agent that I had an opportunity to audition for The Hobbit when I was in the middle of the season at Scoop Lake, because I could shoot a bow and ride a horse. Obviously, don't have service, in the mountains, and kind of got back to my account and was like, oh, well, that would have been cool. But here we are.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, that's kind of, that's taken a bit of an S curve in your career, right? So now instead of walking the red carpet in Hollywood, you're riding a horse and chasing critters in the mountains. So.
Well, see, okay, so that's a very fun part about it. Like every child grows up and they see these epic movies and montages and they're like, man, I just want to be that person getting to do all these epic things and go these epic places. Well, the actors don't get to. So, I kind of got my foot in the door, got to go and play around, and the actors, some of them get to do their own stunts and ride the horses, but most of the time it's the stunt doubles that get to go and have the fun. So I kind of came home and I was like, I'm just going to be main character in my own life. Get to ride my horse around in the bogs and cuss myself every now and then when I want a stunt double.
So this is the Rachel movie. This is much more fun. You get to direct it, you get to produce it, you get to do it all yourself.
Hey, we're all the masters of our own movie. So
cool. Okay, so I want to dig into a bunch of stuff here. So the big thing for me is that I guess it's more common today to have ladies in the bush and doing all the good stuff like guiding, outfitting, and it does go back a long time. But when you started guiding, wrangling, you did it at a very young age, and you were kind of breaking ground. I'm not saying you were the first, but it was early times, and now it's pretty common, right? You get a guide, could easily, it's not 50-50, but so yeah. Talk about what led you to that path, and like how the hell do you start out at 14 years old as a wrangler? Talk me through.
Sheer dumb luck, actually. I had Crayola binoculars when we were kids growing up on the west side of Kelowna, and back when I think I was 6 weeks or 9 weeks old when my mom had met Darren and Wendy Carey at like a kids women's meet and greet for new moms. So they're actually my godparents, and at 11 I was allowed to go north, and then I think they tried to shake me maybe, but I kept coming back like a dirty shirt. So that's kind of how I got my foot in the door. I really wanted a horse. My first job was shoveling manure in exchange for horse rides at what was 8 Mile Ranch back in Joe Rich as a kid. And from there, when I really got serious about wanting a horse, my parents were like, here, why don't you go north and play with all those outfitter horses? That's a great idea. You can go for the summer. We don't have to feed it in the winter. Like, touche on their behalf. And from one thing led to another. I had never really hunted or been around hunting at all. My dad used to hunt a bit with his buddies growing up, but as things change and a blended family, we'll say. Everyone was busy, so it wasn't really a part of our lifestyle back then. And I kind of just started putting my hand up. And it's like, I'd like to go trail horses, and I'd like to go see what this stone sheep hunting's all about. And kind of one thing leads to another. And I remember as kids, we had to prove ourselves, that we were able enough equestrians that we could saddle our own horse, get bucked off, get back on, open and close the gates, and then, eventually start chasing the string. And I think you get to a point where you're like, I really like this. This is something that's challenging. There were days, good Lord, John DeVries, I've burnt so many pancakes thinking in my, childhood head, I need to have a roaring fire to make pancakes. And the amount of pancake batter I went through that first summer, bless John DeVries' heart, because my God, did I burn some pancakes. The art of the rolling coal over an open fire was something that took me a little bit of time to master. But, yeah. They say charcoal's good for the diet, though, so, I was just helping them. But to be honest, after years of getting to wrangle and go and help and put my hand up, when I came back from New Zealand, when I was abroad, I kind of decided I wanted to be an outfitter, but start as a guide. And what does an outfitter need? They need money, they need clientele. So I figured if I was going to make a name for myself and build a clientele that was a know, like, and trust, I'd have to start from the ground up. So I made neon orange hunting resumes. And on my last couple $100, flew myself down to Reno, Nevada, brought my bedroll, threw my bedroll out on Tiffany's floor, Darn Wendy's daughter, and I ended up staying, because there was a bunch of us crashing in that room. I mean, we're all broke 20-year-olds. And I started handing out hunting resumes. I didn't even think they were a thing, but I was like, well, if I'm going to get hired, I should show some level of professionalism. And I got more no's than I did yeses, but the people that said yes, we'll start, you can skin and tag along with some of the guides, and if you get it figured out, then we'll let you loose. I didn't have a truck at this point. I didn't even have a spotting scope to my name. When I'm talking starting out from the very basics, I think I had a pair of hand-me-down binoculars and a good rain jacket, and that was it. And a Dora the Explorer, Cabela's style multi-Mossio backpack. No, none of these fancy straps. And from there, I ended up bumping into friends that I'd made when Jim Shockey's kids, Brandlin was in the Okanagan at the time selling furniture. And even I had met at Rumbolian's in 2009, I think, and we were the only two girls sitting at the bar, and she had just come home from Australia, and I was just going to New Zealand. So we kind of stayed in touch, old-fashioned pen pal. One thing led to another. Jim was shaking my hand by the end of the trade show saying, how would you like to come learn how to run camera and be the rookie guide for what was then their new series, The Professionals. And the rest is history.
So... talk me a little bit through, it's one thing to grow up you want to go horseback, ride a horse, right? And I think that, you kind of alluded to that there, and I've heard you say it before, that was kind of what got you into it, that your interest in horses, you want to ride and that sort of stuff. But that's a huge leap to full on guiding sheep hunters in the mountains and, high elevation stuff. And so where is it, you just touched on it there, you talked about the adventure side of it. Is that what it was for you? You kind of, is it all about the experience and getting out in the wilderness, or?
It was, because, that's before, now this is where you start sounding old. It was before really social media was a thing, right? Everyone was doing it for their own personal mission. And yes, we still do it for that, and it's really cool to share on these different avenues, but back then it was adventure. In the roughest form. You can read about it in magazines, you could see the pictures in the old publications. But I got paid to go camping and hang out with a horse string. And so teenage Rachel thought that that was the be all end all. And then after that, when we got to go and hunt the game, at first I was a little put off because I didn't quite understand why people would come from all over the world to hunt this. But also my world was the size of a pea. At this point, it was a British Columbia pea, but it was the size of a pea. And so that leads to more questions. And you ask, you're like, well, where did this person come from? And our first client, first sheep hunt I was on was Susan. She owned her own restaurant in, I believe it was New York. And I remember sitting there in awe at this woman, and she was telling me about all of her hunting conquests all over the world and the different organizations she went to. And I just, if there was an emoji back then with the head blown off, I remember just sitting there swallowing it all up like a sponge. And so from there you ask more questions, and then you get involved in things. And then as you grow older, those things that were originally sparked with wanting a horse and adventure, it kind of all starts to tie together that there's so much more to the world as we each know it in our day-to-day lives. And it kind of brought me into this greater grandiose community that's worldwide, that I think at the root of all of us, we want to be a part of a community. When you sit around a campfire, you share stories. So to me, the hunting industry became like that extended community with those people that I got to share in those adventures and learn about their way that they adventure. And so to me, that was kind of the heartthrob of it all and the way I fell in love with it.
Very cool. So, and this started really like how old were you when you first did that first trip and went up to Scoop Lake? What age were you at? It was really young.
Grades, I would just graduated grade 6. So that would have been 99.
Wow. Yeah, that's really young.
That was really young. And that was, my grandparents drove me up to Tabor Lake outside Prince George, and I had never been to Prince George at that point. I remember my Uncle Darwin landing in the 185. It was my first time on like a small aircraft, and I remember looking at my papa at the time like wide-eyed, and he was grinning ear to ear, and I was like, I don't know if I'm terrified, excited. I have no idea how big British Columbia is. And he's like, oh, it's another few hours flight up through the clouds. And I was like, what? So yeah, it was.
So that first year that you went into camp, you landed there, like it must have, like that was shocking to get on the airplane out of Tabor Lake, but to land in camp and be in this remote, that I can
still remember. Oh yeah, those those times in your life where you'll never forget. I can still remember when the clouds broke and he started descending down, and the spit at camp arrived, and I could see the corrals and I could see the cabins, and I remember like looking up and down the trench and not seeing anything else. And then I don't think I said anything until we landed. My eyes were just glued to the window, and there was something in the back of my head that was like, I think you're gonna like this. I think you're gonna like this a lot. So
that first year you were in there, was it mostly helping out around like in the camp kitchen, or was it like with the horses? What were you doing?
I don't know if I was much help. I think we were always trying to escape the kitchen. We had to do our chores. We earned our keep. But help we tried. But at 10, 11 years old, you're kind of more apt to want to run away and pretend to make forts. And we did help with chores, and we had certain tasks that we had to do. But, because we were such kids, we were allowed to go and play, and we would pester anyone in camp that would take us for a horseback ride. And there was an old gentleman, Ralph, who was from the Okanagan. And I remember we were chasing each other around as kids. And Ralph was this teacher. He was a shop teacher, actually, from Rutland. And he grabbed this big old tree, and he was riding around like a knight. And I just remember laughing myself, thinking that I'm going to fall off my horse. But he was charging around, and he was showing us around and telling us these elaborate stories. And just, as a child, like, in our head, we really were working hard, but I'm sure we were playing more than we were doing anything else. But a lot of those foundation moments of saddling your own horse and like learning the ins and outs of, even though these were old, hunter horses that were the retired staying at base camp, to us, they were wild Mustangs.
Yeah, very cool. So from there, you did you come back every year? Was that a one-off, and then you eventually?
Oh no, they were screwed. They were stuck with me. I came back my year after I left. Every May I would start packing. School, of course, doesn't get out to the end of June, but every May I would be packed by May 30th, just in case exams or year end was done and wrapped up sooner. And I actually started taking a Greyhound north, back when Greyhound was around. My parents would put me on the bus from Kelowna. I would go Kelowna all the way through the Chilcotin, get off, do a changeover in Prince George. This is like a young teenager. From Prince George, go all the way up to Dawson, do a bus change there, then get on the bus in Dawson Creek, all the way up to Fort Nelson, from Fort Nelson, all the way up the Alaska Highway, and get kicked off at the Bighorn Hotel in Watson Lake. It was 36 hours on a bus.
That in itself is an experience.
Oh,
no,
yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
No, thanks.
Yeah. You live through it, and it definitely taught me about reading people, especially the characters that would get on the bus in the wee hours of the morning. But yeah, every single year, I didn't miss a year until the year I went to New Zealand. So we do the math, that was 99 until 2009, I think was the first year I missed.
Wow.
So
you had that first experience with Jim, went in and camp cook, helped out with guiding, got started. Was it then you're like, no, I want to do this for a living? Because you really were experiencing, like, obviously you liked the lifestyle, but now you're actually doing the work. Was that, kind of a come to Jesus moment for you, or how did that work?
To be honest, I knew I really wanted to guide. I didn't want to be stuck at camp. I really wanted to get out and learn the trails. Like, the pivotal moment was kind of when I got hired by Jim, where it's like you learn how to make this into a career, but there's no how-to book. It's not like, oh, go to college, get the degree. Here you go. Now you can be in the outdoor industry. It's like, it's kind of an open slate. So I remember sitting with Jim after at bear camp, and I drove his truck, so like no pressure or nothing, driving Jim's brand new truck from the top of the island down to their place in Duncan. And it was kind of like an extended interview. And he can be he's a very nice guy, but a very intimidating persona when it's just you and him in a vehicle and you're driving his vehicle, and it's like in the back of your mind, like, don't screw this up, don't crash this thing, don't do anything bad. For God's sakes, go the speed limit. But at that moment when he kind of said, well, if you're going to make this into a career, and I remember him telling Eva and I, it takes 3 years for people to know and remember your name in anything. And Jim sat us down and he's like, because that was the next year, Eva and I decided she was going to go and do a t-shirt sale. So I was going to travel with her, do some photography. I think we did like 8 to 13 trade shows. It's all jumbled together that next spring. Traveling around, I rented a car, had some boxes of shirts, flew to different places with her. We survived Harrisburg, PA, but I think it wouldn't be one pivotal moment, but I remember it was that fall of sitting there trying to figure out, okay, well, how can I pay my bills? If this is going to be something I dive into, yes, you have to be able to pursue your dreams. And that's one thing my parents have always said, pursue your dreams, but don't become a burden on society. If you're going to chase something, go all in, but make sure you've got somewhat of a business plan. And my rough business plan has never deviated. It's always been, if you're going to make a name for yourself as a guide, be a good guide. And if you're going to be a good guide, work for the good outfitters, but work for a bunch of them. Don't just work for 1 or 2 places. And that's kind of the hardest part, because you'd get settled in on a place and you'd really love the way it is. But, after 5 or 6 years, it's like, okay, well, I had a game plan. In 10 years, I wanted to work the Northwest Territories, the Yukon, and British Columbia. And I wanted to work for the areas that has some of the best reputation for stock, for the guides that always want to come back. They were always kind of hard to get into. So like even at Harold's, I got in by signing up as a trail cook. Because he didn't have a guiding position at the time, but they needed a trail cook. And I said I could probably saddle a horse and figure that one out. And by the end of the season, Harold let me take a few caribou hunters, just because I proved that I wanted to be there and ride for the brand. And the next year, I got totally thrown into a different realm and taken away from the horse string and went backpacking. And let me tell you, I'll never forget, there's a gentleman named Trevor Shoelist, and I got to go as his helper on the first backpack hunt. And that winter, he sent me an email, said, Rachel, ounces make pounds. I want to see toothpaste in a Ziploc bag. Cut your toothbrush down so it's only 1.5 inches with enough to hold with your 2 fingers. Cut all your weight down. Well, what did I do? I brought way too much stuff. I wouldn't say anything out loud, but I definitely remember getting back to camp after that first hunt going, well, that was dumb. I don't need this. I don't need this. I don't need this. I definitely didn't need that. But it was kind of a cool opportunity to like see the other side, because I'd always been on horse crew.
So you've had that experience now. You've guided to these 3 different areas. Mm-hmm. You've done the backpack. You've done horses. You've done moose. You've kind of done it all, really. If you distilled it down, what stands out? And I'm going to ask you what's your favorite, but you're going to say, I know what you're going to say, but what's your favorite?
Definitely the sheep hunting. That's the part that I didn't anticipate. I thought it would be super easy, where you'd just be like, oh yeah, no, screw the Yukon. I'm staying in BC. Or, you know what, BC sucked. I don't like it here. There's too many residents. I'm going to the NWT, because if you see someone, you're probably high-fiving them and asking if they're lost, because you just don't have the same pressure. what I found was I appreciated each for what it was. And so you fall in love with each place because of its differences. So, the NWT, it was like being in a game park because you're not hunting against anyone else. The game is usually very, very good. And it makes you look like a rock star with how much game there is. You still got to hunt hard. Don't get me wrong. Like it's not a walk in the park by any stretch of the imagination. In BC, you got good sheep if you know where to go, and you got to hunt hard. You got to be crafty, and you got to cover your tracks. And for God's sakes, don't take a skyline photo because your outfitter's either going to fire you, and every resident on a talk show is going to know where you're at. And the Yukon, not as much hunting pressure, but definitely gets a little bit more winter depending on where you're at. And they produce some great animals as well. And it's, part of the Klondike history. And so there's a lot of cool Canadian history in it and good game with kind of the happy medium of resident pressure, if you would, between BC and the NWT. So it kind of set me up for, okay, I can go to any one of these places because I know, if the stars align, I have a little bit of a background in each that will hopefully help me as I move forward.
So now you talked about these different places. You wanted to be with the best outfitters, but you also wanted to do different experiences. Was that just because you wanted different experiences in life, or was it to build a resume? What was the sort of motivation for wanting to move around? Because there's guys and gals spend their whole career with an outfitter, obviously.
So yeah, I like to think of the boy on the farm analogy. If you grow up in a family of ranchers, you only know one way. And it might not be a bad way, but there's new technology, there's new advancements. So, you encourage, your kids to go off and learn a different technique. And they might learn something they really like, or they might realize, hey, we actually do this a really good way. So that was kind of the idea I wanted to have, not only between chasing the different species that came with each province and territory, but it was learning what I really liked about what some outfitters did, whether it came down to how they handled their horse stock, how they wanted to be able to, with their crew, did they have enough crew? Were you crew hungry? Did you have, how were the kitchens run? Because that's one thing you always hear when you go to these trade shows is we can't control anything about the animals. They're either going to be there or they're not. You can be in the most target-rich environment and they're not there. But you can control your attitude, a good string, which is like horses and your crew, and good food. And all the outfits that I've worked for, it really stood out to me, especially, at Scoop and some of the other places, but Harold Grindy's area up at Ghana, the girls were always crazy busy in the kitchen. They were making sure there was lots of goodies. The hunters love, I mean, who doesn't love baked goodies? It doesn't come in a package. It's that old school experience of, here's a baked bread. And I'll tell you what, Harold Grindy knows how to make some really good bread. And I remember the first year there, he was in the kitchen, baking and cooking. And he looks like a cowboy out of a Louis L'Amour book. And so I was blown away. So, when you look at stereotypes, it was kind of like, oh, that's pretty cool. I really respect that. And then I burnt my first loaf of bread on the barbecue this summer because I had been 9 years since I baked bread. But everyone's made it out. I haven't killed anyone. No one's calling me saying that they've got gut rot. But I've never, this year, I was never a base camp cook. I had never spent so much time in a kitchen. And I did it.
So was that why you ordered pizza?
Oh, man.
We saw that post.
You saw that post. Okay, good. Well, I learned how to make pizza. And my boyfriend's like, I'm going to need you to guide on the roster. We had 2 back-to-back hunts, but we didn't have a base camp cook. So in my head, I was like, oh, no problem. I got a week to prepare. Well, a week to prepare for the rest of the month meant I baked 70 loaves of bread, 1,131 cookies. I counted them all because I didn't even believe it myself. I made 9 different loaves because we had 2 hunt changes. So I did all the baking, and I think I got tendonitis in my wrists from doing so much baking, and my feet were sore. And by the time my Wrangler and I had our boxes packed, and as soon as that hunt change day came, I was down the trail. I was like, I'm out. I need some time. But we did it.
That's cool. So we're going to jump into what you're doing this past year, but you talked about different experiences, different locations. When you think back of all you've done, all these places you've been, all the different experiences, what what comes to mind? Do you think of the people? Do you think about the animals? Do you think about the environment? What really stands out? What's your motivation? Is it like, obviously it's multifaceted, but what really is poignant for you when you think back on it?
Oh, that's a tough one. Good question. I would honestly have to say all of those things are pivotal. But to me, it was the clientele, how they came out. And the areas like that I worked for, like, at Harold's Camp, and I would have to say it's the way that the clients come out of there with the experience. Like if there's one thing that stands out with all the places, I would have to say it's how the clients come out of camp. Did they have a good experience? Because we can do our job and absolutely love it, but at the end of the day, we're in customer service. So each of those places, in a very special way, without naming names or forgetting anyone, to me, it's how did the client perceive the experience? Because I know how I perceive it. It can be a hellish day on the side of a mountain, freezing our butts off in a snowbank, and I'm having a great day. But if my client is miserable, then I better, pack our stuff up and let's go back to the cabin. But to me, that's your signature. It doesn't matter how good the game is, how good you think your horse string is. It's how the clients and the hunters who become friends talk about you and the experience you gave them. It doesn't matter if you're in the Yukon, the Northwest Territories, or BC, but that would be my favorite part about it. I love going to the shows. I love seeing the clients talk about their experience and relive it. And I mean, after a few drinks at the Circle Bar, we all get a little excited, and I'm sure there's hands thrown around, but to me, that's the biggest gift you can give someone, when they get to relive an experience, no matter how truthful or not it might have been, or how big or small the bear was that came in, or how big or bad the pack wreck was when your horse went down in a bog. But of all those different places, the people that came back with the best experiences were kind of a reflection of how good the outfit was that curtailed to them or helped them achieve what they wanted to. If that answers your question in a very open manner.
Political. Are you running for office now, public office, or what? That was very political.
Very political.
We'll go there in a minute. We're going to talk about what's going on for Rachel in the future. But okay, so interesting. You brought up, you're in the customer service business, or you mentioned like customer service. So, when you think of guides and outfitting, especially guides, you don't necessarily think about, but I've heard, and of course I haven't guided before, but I've heard people talk about, it's customer service. You're providing an experience for somebody, and it's all about providing for the customer. I always think it's like technical, right? There's an animal, you got to find the animal, but no, it's about customer experience, the customer experience, eh?
100%. And that's what, as a young guide, it doesn't matter if you're male, female, you want your hunter to be successful. You want to be successful because I know I would take it personal. The first time I sent someone home without an animal, it was not for lack of trying, and I remember beating myself up. And I couldn't make a sheep appear to save my soul. I was everywhere. We were up early, we were to bed late, we were in hidey holes, highs, lows. But at the end of the day, my hunter came up to me and he said, I had the most fantastic time. It was fun. We had fun. We looked at game, we saw game, we just didn't have any luck. And sometimes it's not luck. Or sometimes we just need luck on our side. And I remember not knowing if he was just trying to let me down nicely, but at the end of the day, he said, I've been dreaming about an experience. I'll come back another time. But I got to have it. And then as it turns out, he got to go and stay a few extra days when I went on to my next hunt change. But to me, giving someone that experience is probably the greatest gift. I mean, they have the trophy, it hangs on their wall, but they don't bring the trophy around whenever someone asks them, well, how was your trip here, right? It's all what lives inside and what they remember. So that's one thing we try and stress. It is, my Auntie Wendy said it perfectly, and not to be crass, but she's like, they're paying your wages. You are here because they would like to be here. If no one was paying our wages, as much as we'd love to be in the mountains, I mean, how many of us could afford to fly in and be gone for 3 months just to go hang out, right? It's still, you can have a tycoon from 5th Street, Saks Fifth Avenue, however you want to say it. Clearly I'm cultured here at this point, but the part that's really cool to me is that you can take someone who in their own world is very skilled, very astute, very, out of their realm when you put them in the mountains on a horse, which was the way that the West was settled, and give them something that is 300, 500, 600 millennia old, because this is the original transportation. Yeah, we might be wearing some pretty cool new gear nowadays that help us stay out there longer, but I still will sit in a snowbank and I'm like, man, could you imagine wearing leather boots without, insulate right now and not having a down jacket? That would suck. And, you kind of make conversation like that. And, if a guy's having a down day and you kind of reflect on how advances in technology have made us out here so that we're more comfortable. And it's kind of neat to see people go from, as a casual thing, checking their phone all the time to sitting there and just looking around and enjoying nature. And I think that's the coolest part. You get the people that enjoy it and you get the people that feel very uncomfortable about it. But at the end of the day, the first kind of outweigh the last, and that's what kind of keeps it alive for a lot of us, I think.
Cool. I kind of want to ask you what your worst experience on the mountain is, but it's tough, right? Because if you got a client that listens to this, it's I guess we can't even really, because I'm sure you've had the odd experience that wasn't this.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to put you on the spot. If you want to talk about it, great. But
it was burning bread. It was burning bread.
Burning. No, yeah. Professionally, there's conversations we won't have, but sometimes going in prepared for everything and expecting the unexpected, you just never know. As Miranda Lambert said, there's all kinds of kinds, and they make the world go round, and my God, do you see some of them. So we'll leave it at that.
Cool. Okay, let's talk a little bit about you as a role model, in particular as a female role model. Obviously, a role model for both genders, but you've really created a name. And when people think of the guide outfitting industry, certainly your name's coming up for sure. Talk about how that's played into it and how important that's been, and does it change the way how active, I guess, are you in the mentorship process with young people? Let's talk a little bit about, your influence on that sort of next generation that's looking up to you for guidance.
Oh boy. I'm very humbled by that. I don't know. You don't set out to be something, if that makes sense. I never set out to be anything. I was always told, work hard, keep your head down, actions speak louder than words. And by a product of that, it comes with an awesome responsibility that it still doesn't quite, I don't know. It's kind of an uncomfortable conversation because I don't think I've done any more than other people. And I think there's a lot of very accomplished hunters out there, male and female. I think that what it does come down to is being authentic and not being afraid to show the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think that the last couple of years have been kind of a roller coaster of up and down of trying to take on opportunities and a few risks that have kind of blown up in my face. But at the same time, you just have to keep showing up. It doesn't matter who you are, what your goals are. You're going to get so many no's before you finally say, yes, why don't you come on over? Why don't you take on this role? Why don't you come wrangling or start guiding? That's what you want to do. And I think I haven't been as present on social media the last 2 years as a lot of other people because I'm trying to figure out that dialogue, to be honest. It makes me not uncomfortable because I really enjoy helping people, but there's a way of being proud of your story and owning your story without coming across as arrogant. And I never wanted to be the latter. And having that self-confidence has kind of been the last 2 years of journey of building up that confidence again in yourself to be able to talk about who you are, what your path has been, in hopes that it helps someone else. And the few guides that I've just met recently, some of the younger female guides that are just starting. We were actually at a Halloween party and there's a young gal named Sierra. She's guiding for an outfitter up in the northwest part of BC. And it was so cool to get to sit there and visit with her and just kind of swap stories about what it's like when you show up at the dock and the hunter gets off and they kind of look you up and down like, okay, so you're the trail cook, but where's the guide? And I think the really cool part about social media nowadays is that you can kind of share those stories in a light that you're not coming off as, I don't even know the word because I don't want to misrepresent what I'm trying to say, but it doesn't matter if you're male or female. Everyone's going to have a hard time. I remember talking with some of the outfitters I worked for, and 10 years ago they would ask, are you okay with going with a female guide? And 9 times out of 10, the guys that said, you know what, I'm going to have a real problem with that, were kind of a pain in the butt for the guys that they ended up going with. So it just comes down to a personality thing. But as far as moving forward, I think we're trying to do more. Wild Sheep's doing some great things for the young people. It's got a very good young vibe going for a lot of the wranglers and guides. I know everyone looks forward to shows like that where you can kind of network and swap in stories and share tips that people have learned, from their own experiences. I think COVID it brought the community a little tighter. There's been a lot of guides that have moved on, and there's been a lot of new, fresh faces step up. So as far as mentorship, I think it comes down to communityship, if I'm going to make up a word here. And being able to kind of stay in touch with those people on social media and not be afraid to put your neck on the line and be like, hey, great job, like awesome caribou with your client, to, a new young guide and sharing in each other's victories and stories. I think that's a big thing that people are afraid to put their neck out there, or they're afraid to step forward because they don't want to overstep a boundary. I don't know. It's kind of a touchy one because I think people want to encourage each other. And I know I sure do. But when it comes down to mentorship looks like different avenues for different people, if that makes sense. Some people want to know more about guns. I know I took up bow hunting just because I got given an archery hunter and I didn't know the first thing about a new compound bow. So that winter I dove into it and not being afraid to ask those questions. Do I want to do more of it? Yes, now that I'm settled and kind of figuring out life and how can we help, this next generation. I think that would be something that's more open and on the table as people kind of dive into the new avenues they want to explore.
Okay, cool. So now you've got all these, you got a really strong brand following, like, you're a Yeti ambassador and the list is lengthy. Is that an important part of telling the story and having the outreach through Yeti and the different brands, obviously, beyond that? But how important is that in telling your story and sharing your message and is that an important part of what you do? Is having being a brand ambassador for these different brands?
Yes. It is important in the sense that I've never approached a company to work with them. And I think that's the part that I'm very honored and humbled about, is that I've turned down companies because if I don't believe in something, I can't stand up and openly say, yes, buy this cooler because I think it's going to make your life that much better. I buy into how Yeti lets people tell their stories. And, if you look at any of the great examples in the marketing that people are doing nowadays, people want to hear a story. They want to see real life people doing real life things. And if those products help their life, whether it's staying in the field as a guide, it definitely, it's kind of a pinch me moment when you walk through a store and you get to see a product and you're like, oh, I got to help give a couple feedbacks on that. Or you see a photo in a magazine or something. But the biggest thing has been making sure the story is getting told the right way. I remember back in, I think it was 7 years ago, I think, Yeti came on to Wild Sheep Foundation. There were a few of us that kind of put that organization and other hunting organizations on their radar, because at first it wasn't really something that they had ever dived into. And now it is really cool to be a part of those companies for myself to see how they're helping and how they're giving back. So as much as being a brand ambassador is kind of like a badge of honor, it comes with a responsibility of making sure that I'm not just a yes man. And I've never been a yes man. And that's gotten me out of a few jobs because I won't sugarcoat things, and I don't necessarily tell people what they want to hear, because if I don't believe in it, I'm probably going to be pretty vocal about it. Because at the end of the day, if your brand is built on lies, whether it's personal or commercial, you don't have longevity. So having companies that I've been able to kind of vet through that believe in the story, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, is that people see what they want to see. And when you have companies that believe in you and what your mission is, and standing up for conservation, being a grassroots, you know, I'm not someone that has a TV show. I'm not someone that ever aspired to have a TV show. I got to have a taste of it, and then I ran away from it the other direction, because to me, that's not what was important. What's important is the industry. And with that, you know, as the career has kind of developed, I haven't had time to really sit down and dive into, okay, how are we going to make, you know, Yeti more aware of, you know, the young guides up and coming. Like, those are all stories that kind of naturally progress as you work with a company. It's like building a relationship, and having that trust between each other. So they're always evolving. It means a lot. I think that when you have, just because you have the opportunity to work with those companies doesn't necessarily make you a better guide or not. But it definitely helps tell the story. And I think as long as it's telling the story, then we're accomplishing something, and we're helping the animals, the industry, and the overall community.
Yeah. Speaking of stories, I wanna hear one of your favorites from a day hunting or guiding or whatever. You got to have something cool that sticks with you.
In 2015, I was supposed to hunt an archduke, and he couldn't make it for that particular hunt because he was at the royal wedding. So in 2016, he came back, and this gentleman got off the plane with his son, and he wasn't very sure. They actually sent another guide with me for the outfit I was working for at the time, because he wasn't very sure, you know, if he really wanted to have a female guide, you know, staunch Catholic family and an accomplished hunter. And it was a very cool experience, because each day, you know, not over talking, not overshadowing, but just getting to be there in the presence of someone who's hunted internationally with a Matthews Mission Craze bow. He's like, the bow works for me. It works for my shoulder. You know, he would train. He shot an elephant with that bow. He obviously had to train for months, years ago. So that way his actual overall arrow length was lethal. But I remember growing in appreciation. It felt mutual. And we've actually since stayed in touch over the years. But getting to appreciate someone from a standpoint from an old European culture, and for him to have come over and to have gone hunting together, it was a very unique relationship. In a storyline, it was almost like we grew for respect of each other. And we were able, he was due for an ankle surgery 3 weeks after going home, and we were archery hunting sheep and caribou. We were able to kill 2 beautiful caribou for his son and then for him. And we archery hunted sheep. We went up the same mountain, did the same stalk, trying to make it happen. And I think it was like on the 7th day of the 12th hunt, he kind of said, you know, it's been a very long time since I've harvested anything without my bow. But he said, my pride and my ankle will no longer let me do this. And we were able to harvest a beautiful old ram. We still got into 100 yards on this thing, just so it was still as much of an archery hunt as we could. And I remember at the end of it, even to the very last day of his hunt, he said, you know, Rachel, we can't shoot this from our bed. We should still go try. I still have tags for a wolf, you know. But at the end of each day, whether I rode him through a rainstorm, through the willows, through muck and mire, his horse trying to go down the river, at the end of the day, he came to me and he took my hand and he said, today was a wonderful day. Today was a beautiful day. And just his admiration for being there, I was like, my God, the horse almost tried to kill you today, but you're happy. I'm okay. But it was just the guy, his charisma and zest for life. It was infectious. And, you know, I learned how to lace up my boots differently, you know, but it's still, I talk about that hunt almost every hunt I have. You know, something will come up about who have you hunted with in the past, you know, when hunters ask you. And I don't necessarily say it was the Archduke, but I tell them about someone who had the absolute zest and passion for life, that at the end of each day, no matter how miserable it was, they went to bed happy and they woke up with an exuberant amount of energy for the next day, because that day was going to be a good day. So metaphorically, like, I wish to be more like that, and I strive to be more like that, because that person was so wonderful to be around, no matter what was thrown at them, that it just makes everything that much more worthwhile.
Awesome. Cool. So let's talk a little bit about where you're at now. So let's talk a little bit about this season. I know on our last trial run on the podcast here, before we lost our Wi-Fi, we started talking about what you did this past season. Now, I'll preface it by saying that you talked about having your own concession and doing your own thing. So is that still on the horizon? What's in the future for Rachel Ahtila? We just talked about politics. I was joking a little bit, but clearly you didn't laugh too loud. So there's a story there. So I want to hear what's on the future for Rachel.
The start of this year, for a good friend, I was going to be running one of their concessions, actually totally out of my comfort zone in Saskatchewan. And as we kind of did the marketing season, trying to roll over hunters from 3 years, the gentleman who owned the area just kind of said, hey, we just can't make this work. And so going into, I guess it would be like March, April, I actually had nothing on the books. And I was going to go just hunt for myself. I was going to go be a BC resident, and I was going to get kind of a little bit more focused on kind of future forward things if I was going to go and help at an area. And my boyfriend at the time, he was going to be running an area up in the Yukon. And I kind of said, well, I'm going to go run my area, you run your area, and, you know, we'll visit. I'll come up for a couple of weeks, but this is your deal and this is my deal. And, you know, it's a new relationship. And they always say, if you go to the mountains, you're either coming out together or you're not. So, as the season kind of progressed, he asked me to come and help out with a hunt or two, which I was more than excited to. And as the season started going through calving and into branding season, he kind of was like, oh, how do you feel about being a base camp cook? I was like, what? But I said, of course, I'm up to try anything. And so we dove right in. He's running an area in the Yukon. And I went from being a guide to, you know, guiding a hunt at the time and agreeing to be a base camp cook. And I'll tell you what, I've never reached out to more cooks in my life being like, dear God, Rachel, do not screw this up. Because I've helped bake meals for Dixie Hammett when they had Sicking River Outfitters, but base camp cook was never something I had on the resume. So I dove in and we went to the Yukon. I got to help shoe the horses and get them on the road and do all the parts of, you know, traveling north. And the biggest challenge that I sat down and had a whole bottle of wine over, there's a lot of responsibility when it comes to ordering groceries, gentlemen. And neither of us had ever ordered groceries for an entire season going to the north, and our last Costco being in Prince George or in Grand Prairie. So there was no foreknowledge, there was no previous information that had been passed down. And I literally sat there a glass and a half in and I pulled out all my old Guide Outfitter cookbooks. And I was like, well, let's start from the bottom. If I know I have these ingredients, these are, you know, I'll go through a bunch of the staunch recipes that I remember that are good hearty meals for making bread and everything else. And I'll start with a grocery list that way on ingredients. And we took my living quarters horse trailer to Prince George and we loaded up the entire back of it. I had this book I called the God Book because I literally had folders of recipes and I had made lists. I'm a big list maker. Bless everyone's heart. I had so many lists, but I sat there with this cart and I would be filling up a cart and Jordan's mom would be running the cart to Jordan at the checkout line. Jordan would take it there and fill up the horse trailer. And we did about 7 or 8 of these carts. And then we kind of looked at each other at the end and we're like, that's it. And, a couple thousands of dollars later, but I was pretty impressed based on what we did. We didn't run out of the things that we needed from down south. Everyone was very well fed, and I got to go guide the archery sheep hunt, which was the second hunt of the year. And then I ended up doing 2 horseback hunts back to back for moose in September. And then in between all the other time that we really don't have when you're up there, I was cooking and not burning things except for toast. So I'm just going to preface this, there's all these Traegers and these green eggs and all these other things out there that make cooking look very easy. And you're like, oh, I'm going to smoke cheese. I'm going to smoke a pie. Barbecues and bread do not go well. We were sitting there having lunch and literally there was flames pouring out of this barbecue right close to the house. So we mitigated that, and they kept it in the freezer as a token of remembering until the very last hunt, and when I took it upon myself to feed it to the birds. So, but yeah,
I see that every summer here in Prince. You see the outfitters and their wranglers and their handlers coming through with the carts. I'm like, you're going north, I can tell. And you just see somebody in a panic. They got a big list, and they're going,
that was me.
It's just nuts.
I literally, you're like, I'm walking around with a list. You feel like a conductor of an orchestra, and I was like, but it's an orchestra that you've never really led the conduction on. So but you know what? Fake it till you make it, and we made it. So. But yeah, we were the mass migration between there, Prince George. We met up with some of the guys going into the Bessa. And this year, the crazy part was, with COVID, canned goods were really hard to find. So if you didn't pre-order them, like peas and vegetables and like all the different fruits, it was something that really stood out to me this year, is that people have definitely stocked up, or the production side has been down elsewhere. Because like jams. All the things that I remember being in the kitchen at the different camps I've been to, there were certain things that I kind of zeroed in on, and I'd buy enough for, a couple hunts at a time when the hunt changes. But there were some ingredients that, to me, were no-brainers being on the shelves between Prince George, Fort St. John, into Whitehorse, and there just wasn't anything. So I learned that one. If there's going to be case lot, buy it in the winter and stock it up in the horse trailer.
Yep.
That's a crazy world. And so, but so you did a good job this year. The problem is now you're coming back next year as camp chef, right? So.
I might have to negotiate like a sanity guiding trip, like every other hunt, or every third at least. But that's a part though too, is that you can't, that's the hardest part I'm finding. There's a couple other women that they're slowing down as guides, or they're having families or running areas now. And I know, like, my good friend Glenda Grote, like when she first had her son, it was like you identify yourself as this person who that's who you are. It's part of your persona. You go to the mountains, you guide, and now all of a sudden, she's a mom and she didn't go guiding. And so, yeah, that's into the future, but like there's certain things that I'm noticing that if I want to be a mom and I want to be able to, have a family, I still want to raise my own family, but I'm just going to have to like negotiate, okay, well, I'm going to need a timeout and I'm going to go guide a sheep hunt, or I might take off for the first part of moose season, and just get my fix so that way, you can still show up in other parts of your life. But yeah, it's a real thing. Guys can go guiding, and it's no easier for them, I'm sure, because they got families at home, but those are things as you get older on your radar that you're like, career guiding 9 months of the year, gone living out of a storage locker. It was a good time, but probably not sustainable.
It definitely does change though. And you think about it, like for a guy, he doesn't have to worry about this little kid in tow, right? Like, like whatever, like, but if you're a new mom, that kid is going to be attached to you for one guiding season, almost guaranteed, right? So it definitely changes things. But I guess it's like any other job, right? You just make concessions, you take your maternity leave or whatever the case may be, right? So
yeah, well, maternity leave might be like, here's a bottle, I'm going to go run up the hill.
Yeah.
But but you know what the cool part is though, actually, to throw it in, when I was a kid at Scoop Lake, there was a gal there, her name was Deb Wild, and she, she could run a chainsaw better than most of the guys. She was there shoeing horses. Well, her little son had come with her to the mountains. Well, her little son is now old enough to guide, and who was it who drove past our base camp? And I hadn't seen this gal in probably 15 years. And I get out and I go over and introduce myself, and I was like, well, how the heck are you? Well, long story short, she's out there with her son there doing a pack trip, mother-son deal, sorry, got carried away here. And he actually came and guided for us this year. So it was really cool to get, to be able to see people from your past and see them raise their families, and then now, have part of their family working for you, which was really cool. And he did an awesome job. It was his first guiding experience, and he had a riot. They worked really great with the crew.
Very
so that's
cool.
kind of the cool part. Yeah.
That is super cool. But that means also, Rachel, that you're getting older. Just saying. Just saying.
Oh, shots
We
fired.
all are.
Woo, shots fired. Yes.
Okay, let's. So on that note, and you talked about no longer living 9 months out of a suitcase or whatever, a storage locker. What's on the horizon? So we are seeing some hunting concessions come up and change hands, and kind of the new generation, but we still see the Darwin and Wendy's of the world out there, like doing a great job. Ron and Brenda, it's incredible that the legacy they've created. But is there an opportunity? Are you looking? Is that something you want to do? Do you want to have your own place? What does that look like for you?
Right now, I think we're focusing on kind of the 5-year goal. Right now, buying areas with how COVID is they're astronomical. So I think down the road, that's what a person would really like to do. It's it's not being the boy on the farm, but at the same time, with how expensive these things are right now, finding the right opportunity. And the scary part is with legislation right now, BC with the grizzly bear going away, with some of the changeover of the stewards of the land. I think maintaining the goal, yes. Right now, I think in this next year, we're going to focus on, how can I use the relationships that I've been working on the last 10 years to help keep telling the story and be able to kind of take a step back and dive into everything that has helped made me who I am. It was really cool this year getting to see my partner build a crew, and some of the guys that had helped and I've met over the years came and worked for him, and now getting to see them develop into guides. I think focusing on the short term right now, that would be kind of harboring what we did this past year and moving forward. And of course, in the long term, who doesn't want to own their own area? That would be the legacy, I think, that we would want to continue. Jordan and I both, we've both got to work for outfitters that, they're old school. You had to be a hand. You had to know how to shoe horses. You had to know how to pack a string, You had to be able to cook. You had to be able to show the hunters a good time. And there's still that romanticism there that I think we want to continue because it's something that we both believe in. So, but, we're also, don't put the cart before the horse. But I think it was really cool. I'd never gone to the mountains with, a partner. And especially, we've only been together a year, I guess, almost 6 months or something. I don't know. It feels like forever, but it was really neat to go together, learn about each other, and work as a team. And I think that's the biggest thing is, when owning one of these areas, like you say, you named a lot of couples. And at the end of the day, it's like ranching, it's like farming, it's like any old diehard. You have to have a good teammate. You have to have someone who's just as passionate, or if not as passionate as you. Because there are days where everything is going wrong up there. And you can't just run to Canadian Tire to find parts to fix it. Like, you got to rely on each other. You got to be able to, if a crew member goes down or you have people quit or whatever ends up happening, someone's got to jump in and fill that role. So it was really neat for a new relationship to kind of get to see each other, not necessarily stretch to our ends max, but to have to take on a multitude of different roles and do so with such grace that no one knows how stressed you actually are, or, all the things that are happening behind the scenes to get to run an area that not only has aircraft, it has horses, it has Argos, it has driving back and forth, it has northern logistics, groceries. And I think that was like the coolest, funnest part. Yeah, I got to stand in the kitchen and cook for a bunch of it, but getting to get out and do the other parts of like the puppeteer and get to see your partner do that, that was fun. That was the part that's like the next chapter. If you don't get to be a guide full time, but you get to be a part of that, I think that's like that next chapter in the story.
Well, it's a great progression too, from now it's more of a managerial position, and now so that does lead you into that, owning your own outfit piece too, right? So
yeah, exactly. So I don't know, as long as we can keep fighting the good fight, I'm very blessed to work with Sig Sauer, and I don't know about you guys, but with COVID, we haven't been able to get a bunch of the handguns up north, and now with our government putting the freeze on it, I've been battling trying to get pistols, because that's one of the things that I think we need to start telling the story on, here in BC and across the Western provinces and territories, is standing up, because it was crazy how fast they were able to take away something so simple and blame, the mismanagement of firearm use. So, in the off season, I think you're probably going to see me get a little bit more political and using the companies that have stood behind me to have a better outreach to tell the Western story of how we actually use these and why they shouldn't be taken away, and stand up for our freedoms a bit more. Those are conversations that are happening right now, but obviously we just got home from being gone for 3 months, shipped calves, getting firewood, chopping ice, and racing back and forth trying to find cell phone service when you live in the boonies. So there's a few things that are kind of coming together that I had started earlier this year before I got handed lemons, but I think the lemonade that I'm making is going to be strong enough that it's going to be exciting to see where it goes.
Well, let's talk more on that, and like, hats off to you, because it's the same old crap, Rachel, and you know better than I do. The grizzly bear went away, and so many people said, well, I don't hunt grizzly bears, so I don't care. Handguns went away. I don't have a handgun. I don't care. So, but it's just like the slippery slope, right? It's just one thing. Anyway, I don't need to go off on a tangent, but let's keep that dialogue going, and keep, if we can use this platform to keep people's, awareness around these issues, because maybe you don't hunt grizzly bears, maybe you don't have a handgun, but it just goes to show you that they just chip away just one piece at a time.
Oh, exactly. And I think that's where using platforms like what you guys have created, especially for people that are local to British Columbia, and with the reach that you have beyond. I remember sitting at a conference earlier this year, and, there was individuals talking about, helping other people because they were unable to harvest grizzly bears anymore. And it's like, well, the only reason we're unable to harvest grizzly bears is because obviously X, Y, and Z. But when I looked around the room at the outfitters that were sitting at this conference, that was a huge revenue loss when paying for their areas, when helping with their moose quota, with their calf, survival rate. And I think the hardest part is that, socialism is even leaking in on a greater scale to our wildlife management. And I think that's the part that's the scariest for me, is that, when you talk about the outfitters that have been here for 30 and 40 years, and the people that they had grown up with and what changes they've seen, without becoming, someone who stands on a soapbox, it's like, how do we communicate this narrative that's not only a narrative anymore, but it's real? They are taking these things away. So, as a cohort or a community, we need to start getting a little bit more vocal. But I'll tell you what, this is where the censorship is scary. If I post anything about hunting, if I post anything about pistols, handguns, if I tag anything on my social media, when you look at your viewers on the back end of like your Instagram story, say, I will go from thousands of views to a couple hundred. So tell me they aren't censoring it. And there's been videos and stuff in the past, especially politically this spring, we were talking about the anti-vax mandate, we were talking about the anti-mask. And now all of a sudden, they're able to control these platforms where we're communicating. So it's like, how do we counter that? And that's, I think that's going to be the next big piece of the puzzle, is how do we keep communicating when they start pulling away our avenues? Are we going to have to go old school? Are we going to have to hold seminars? Are we going to have to go door to door? And I think that's the part that, as we gear up to stand up for, especially, our freedoms and what they are, that's where we're going to have to maybe go to a little bit more of guerrilla warfare, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, we saw it with our Act Now campaign. With
Really?
Some of the posts and videos we did, we'd watch our engagement go from thousands to dozens if we were lucky, and it was like they're shadow banning, but whole other conversation we can have there. So.
Yeah, let's schedule another one really soon. Like in the next couple of months, maybe post Sheep Week, and because there's a whole bunch of stuff I want to talk about here, and all stuff you were just hitting on. I'm like, oh my goodness, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that. I want all those things you just talked about. So, but we usually go an hour and we're over. So, we'll come back and we'll hit on those things and hopefully by then you'll have some more on the handgun stuff, and we can talk more about that and how we can get more proactive and just keep everyone engaged. Like we're in this all together, right? And we just have to keep that in mind, that we're all fighting for the same things for the most part, the big picture stuff, the 90%. So let's just keep fighting on that 90%. So anyway, don't need to tell you that, but it's awesome. Awesome comments. So to wrap up, what's the plan? You going to Sheep Week? What's happening in the next 6 months for you?
Oh, we're going to make it through winter. Hopefully hell doesn't freeze over. I'm sure you guys are in the same bet. But as far as I know, as soon as we get everything rolling here, it's going to be Dallas Safari Club, Sheep Week. This year, I'm honored to work with Safari Club International, and we're going to be in Nashville, Tennessee this year, which is going to be exciting. And the theme is Women Go Hunting. So there's been kind of some cool happenings on the back end for kind of the international stage. And then I'm going all the way to Raleigh, North Carolina in March, right at the start of calving season. So hopefully I'm not marred from coming home. But to the first trade show that Eva Shockey and I ever booked, and actually where she met her husband at the Dixie Deer Classic. So I'm dragging Jordan all the way out to hear what a deer call and a turkey plate is. But I'm going to be holding a presentation out there. I believe that is the first weekend in March. And then rolling into calving season. So lots of cabin time in the next little bit, and kind of putting some pen to paper, and hopefully having a few things kind of line up that have been on the back burner and kind of burning a hole in my pocket. So I'm excited. It'll be exciting.
Cool. So for our listeners, we'll put it in the show notes, but where do they want to go to check you out? Insta, what's the best place to check out Rachel?
So I would just keep it with the Instagram at Rachel Ahtila. All of the developments that are going to be happening with the website and everything are going to be starting and kicked off through that platform, and we'll be going from there. So one step at a time. Thank you guys very much. I really enjoy the conversation, and I'm excited that there's lots of us that are on the same playing field. So hopefully we can keep this momentum going.
Awesome. We appreciate it. Thank you, Rachel, for all you do for our hunting community, for women in hunting, for and all these things that you're working on too. I'm really excited. And like I said, there's just a whole new podcast with talking about these new ideas that you're working on, and having these tough conversations that we need everyone in our space to get on board with. So thank you for your time and for all you do.
Oh, thank you guys very much. I appreciate it. Very honored.